Before the first cock crowed, Ada was already awake. While the rest of the world was still buried in sleep, she was down on her knees, scrubbing the cold kitchen floor with her bare hands. Her knuckles were bruised, her fingers red and swollen. She didn't mind. Pain was nothing new to her. It was the only life she knew. She had been living in this house since she was a child. Not as a daughter. Not even as a person. Just a house help. A shadow in the background, one who washed, cooked, cleaned, fetched water, ironed clothes, mopped floors, polished shoes, and sometimes, on good days, was allowed to eat. Sometimes. She lived in the servants' quarters behind the house. It was a tiny store with a mat and a bucket. No fan, no window, just heat and mosquitoes and silence. And still, she stayed. Not because she didn't want to leave, but because she had nowhere else to go. Everyone called her Ada, but no one really knew her. She was just the girl that Madam took in after her parents died, a pity project, a charity case. Or so they said. But if this was charity, it felt like punishment. Just then, a voice came from the hallway, loud, sharp, and full of venom. "You're still crawling like a snail? Lazy thing!" Madam, she entered the kitchen wearing a silky morning robe that swayed like she was walking on a runway. Her gold bangles clinked together as she raised her hand and pointed at Ada. "So this is why I feed you? You want to disgrace me in front of visitors with your snail speed cleaning? Is that what your dead mother taught you?" Ada quickly got up and bowed her head. "Sorry, Ma," she whispered. Madam scoffed. "Don't sorry, Mummy. You should be kneeling every morning and thanking me. If not for me, you'd be eating dust by the roadside. People like you should be grateful just to breathe under a real roof." Ada nodded gently. She didn't argue. She never did. Because if there was one thing Madam hated more than laziness, it was backtalk. God, Madam continued, pacing the kitchen. "Why didn't lightning strike your mother before she gave birth to you? You think I don't know your type? Ungrateful child. Always quiet like you're keeping secrets. I see you." Ada's lips pressed together tightly, but still, she didn't speak, because silence had become her safety, her protection, her only power. Later that morning, the house came alive. Important guests were arriving. The driver was washing cars. The cook was roasting meat in the backyard. Amaka, the cook's assistant, was busy arranging juice cups, but still found time to hiss at Ada. "Your own job na to disappear, right? Madam say make you hide your bush face before her friends see you. Don't come and pour bad luck on their meal." Ada turned away and quietly moved to the side yard. That was where she always hid during big gatherings, her own special corner behind the generator. Nobody called her. Nobody looked for her. She didn't exist during important occasions. She sat on the ground and watched the sky. There was no food for her yet. She would eat after the last guest had left. If any crumbs remained, she had gotten used to it. To the hunger, the long hours, the shouting, the insults. But something felt strange today. Somehow the wind felt heavier. Then, one day, for Ada, it's a normal routine. But upstairs, in the master bedroom, Chief Enosi, the man of the house, lay on his bed, breathing slowly. Each breath sounded like a whisper fighting to survive. He had been sick for weeks. Doctors came and went. Medications piled up. Madam cried whenever visitors came. But the moment they left, she went back to scrolling through her phone. But today something changed. The nurse on duty saw his hands trembling and rushed to him. "Chief," she called softly. "Do you need anything, sir?" He tried to speak. His lips moved, but his voice was fading. "Call her," he said weakly. "Who, sir?" the nurse asked. "Ada." The nurse blinked. She looked confused. "Ada? The house help?" "Downstairs," he whispered. But before she could ask more, his chest rose one last time and stopped. Chief Enosi was gone. A loud scream followed, the kind that shook the house from wall to wall. "Ah! My husband! Ah!" Madam wailed like the world had ended. Her voice echoed through the walls, bouncing off chandeliers and marble floors. She rolled on the floor, slapping her body, pulling her wig halfway off. Guests gathered quickly. Morning came, past arrived. Ada watched from behind the fence. She didn't scream, she didn't speak, she just stood there, staring at the sky, because her heart had been quiet long before Chief's heartbeat stopped. She didn't cry that day. That night, the compound was filled with visitors. Important men, rich women, politicians, distant relatives who never cared before. They came to do fake cry, eat gossip and be seen. They all dressed in black, holding handkerchiefs to wipe off fake tears. Madam sat at the centre, surrounded by sympathisers. But Ada, she was told to stay inside. She watched through the window, holding the curtain slightly open, and something inside her chest burned. The next morning, the compound was quiet again. The funeral was scheduled for the weekend. Everyone was busy planning, arranging, discussing. That's when the knock came. Firm, direct, important. A tall man in a grey suit stood at the gate holding a brown envelope. "Good morning," he said. "I'm here to read Chief Enosi's will." The gatekeeper let him in quickly. The man walked straight to the living room where Madam sat. "I'm Mr. George," he introduced. "Chief's personal lawyer. I have instructions to read the will today." Madam straightened up. Her face looked calm, but her fingers were shaking slightly. "Of course," she smiled, "you can go ahead." Her mind was already dancing with calculations. The house, the lands, the cars, the businesses. She looked up at the ceiling and whispered under her breath, "Ah, God, at least let something good come from this death." But little did she know, what was inside that brown envelope was nothing like what she was expecting. The living room was silent, unnaturally silent. Even the wall clock ticking sounded loud. Madam sat upright in her armchair like a queen about to receive a crown. She had changed into a deep black lace, her gold bangles swapped for silver, her makeup adjusted to look just enough like grief. A few relatives had gathered. Some were already whispering in corners, pretending to mourn but more curious about what Chief had left behind. There were cousins, nephews, a brother who hadn't visited in years, all wearing long faces but eyes sharp as knives. The lawyer, Mr. George, stood in the centre of the room with the brown envelope clutched firmly in his hand. He cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Chief Anthony Enosi," he began. The room grew colder. A few people crossed their legs. Madam folded her arms. One of the cousins leaned forward, already dreaming of land documents. Ada stood at the far end of the hallway, not inside the living room, not with them. She stood near the curtain, quiet like a piece of furniture. Her clothes were plain, her hands folded in front of her, and her eyes, deep, tired and unreadable, watched everything. No one acknowledged her. Not one person asked her to sit. She wasn't family. She was just the girl who cleaned up after them. The lawyer opened the envelope carefully. The sound of paper sliding out was somehow louder than usual. He held the document, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. "To my beloved wife, Veronica Enosi." Madam's lips stretched into a slow smile. Her shoulders relaxed. She turned slightly toward the crowd, already forming a picture in her mind. "The house is mine. The business, mine. Ada? She can leave today." But the lawyer continued. "I leave the Lexus Jeep and a personal allowance to be paid quarterly from my fixed deposit account. The guest house at Epé is also hers." Madam's smile twitched. "Quarterly allowance?" She blinked. Madam blinked again and said politely, "Is that all?" The lawyer paused. He didn't answer her. He simply turned to the next line. "To my brother, Elder Kenechukwu Enosi, I leave the sum of 2 million naira." The old man grinned toothlessly. "Ah, Tony, my brother, good man." "To my cousin, Afani, I leave my 2005 Toyota Hilux and 1 plot of land in Enugu." Ifeanyi snapped his fingers and whispered, "God, you're faithful." Whispers began to grow. Heads turned, scanning the room. "That's it. What about the main house? What of the company?" Madam sat up straighter. She said coldly, "Please, Mr. George, where is the rest?" Mr. George didn't respond. He simply turned to the last section of the will. His voice lowered slightly, firm, clear, with a touch of hesitation. The remainder of Chief Anthony Enozi's estate, his properties, investments, shares, company rights, and this mansion, have been willed to. He paused. Madam leaned forward. The relatives leaned forward. Even Ada, though still silent, felt her heart knock against her chest. Mr. George looked around the room, then slowly said, "The full details of this section have been sealed in a separate file to be opened and executed privately in front of the beneficiary only." Gasps filled the room. Madam Enozi shocked. "What do you mean, privately? This is my husband's will. That's what he instructed," the lawyer replied calmly. This part of the inheritance was to be handled directly with the person named. Alone. The room erupted into confusion. Why would he do that? What kind of secrecy is this? We're his family. We deserve to know. Mr. George raised a hand, silencing the room. His wishes were very clear. He believed that not all truths were meant for open ears. Madam's hands gripped the armrest. Her mouth opened, then shut again. Her eyes flickered, confused, worried, and just a little afraid. "So who is this beneficiary?" she asked. "Can't say," the lawyer replied. "Not here." Not here, but they've been contacted. They'll meet me at the office tomorrow morning." Ada shifted slightly behind the curtain. Nobody looked her way. Nobody noticed how her hands had tightened or how her eyes were suddenly filled with something strange. That night, the mansion was restless. Madam didn't eat. She paced up and down her bedroom, replaying the lawyer's words over and over. To be opened privately. Not all truths are meant for open ears. Her heart raced. Why hadn't Chief told her about this? What was he hiding? Meanwhile, downstairs, Ada sat by the kitchen sink, washing plates from the guests' dinner. The water was cold. Her hands were shaking. But she wasn't cold. Something inside her was boiling, hot and quiet. But she kept doing her work, so my life here has expired just like that. Where else can I go? I'm so sure Madam would throw me away soon. The next morning came too slowly for Madam. She hadn't slept a wink. Her pillow was dry, but her mind soaked in confusion. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, her nightgown wrinkled, her wig tossed on the floor, her eyes sunken and heavy. "What kind of will is that?" she murmured to herself. "How can the most important part be private?" She stood up suddenly and paced the room. "He never told me anything. Nothing. I gave him children. I gave him years. And now, secrecy?" The mirror didn't answer her questions. The room didn't calm her nerves. She picked up her phone and dialed the lawyer. No answer. She tried again. Still no answer. "This man wants to give me high blood pressure." Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters behind the house, Ada had just finished her morning routine. She swept the backyard, cleaned the guest toilet, and refilled the water drums. But her heart was far from her duties. Her mind kept drifting back to the living room, to the lawyer's voice, to the sealed file. She hadn't been called. No one said her name. Yet something inside her stirred. It wasn't greed. It wasn't curiosity. Her spirit was disturbed. Why would Chief hide something from Madam? This is trouble, real trouble. But by 10:15 a.m., Mr. George sat in his quiet office. Mahogany shelves surrounded him. The air smelled of leather files and dusted truths. He unlocked a small metal drawer and brought out a cream-coloured envelope. It had no name on it, just the late Chief's signature sealed in wax. He stared at it for a moment. "You always had secrets, sir," he muttered. Just then the door creaked open, and Ada stepped in, quietly, slowly. She didn't wear anything fancy, just the same plain dress, her hair tied with a scarf and her eyes looking down. "Good morning, sir," she whispered. "You suddenly sent for me, sir." George stood and nodded gently. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. He simply gestured to the chair across from him. Ada sat down. Then he placed the envelope between them. Still no name, still no explanation. "This is for you," he said. Ada's eyes widened slightly. "For? Me?" He nodded again. "Chief left instructions. Everything that's in here is yours to know." Ada didn't touch it. Her hands trembled slightly. Mr. George leaned back in his chair. He never said much about you, but I could tell you meant something. I was just the help, Ada replied quickly, almost ashamed. Yes, the lawyer said slowly, but even shadows carry stories. Back at the mansion, Madam was pacing the living room like a lioness whose den had been disturbed. She had called 3 of Chief's friends, hoping for clues. Nothing. She had searched his wardrobe, his documents, even checked the drawer he always locked. Still, nothing. What could he possibly hide from me? What is he trying to do from the grave? She turned sharply as the gate creaked. Ada walked in, carrying a white file under her arm. Madam's eyes followed her like a hawk. She saw the envelope, she saw the look in Ada's eyes, and something inside her snapped. Madam, where are you coming from? Ada, nowhere, ma. Madam, what is that you're holding? Nothing important. Madam marched closer and snatched the file. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. No documents, just one sheet. She froze because she recognized the handwriting. It was Chief's. Madam? Why did he give you this? Who are you, really? Ada stepped back. Ada, you'll find out soon enough. What do you mean? What do you mean? Ada said nothing else. She turned and walked away, upstairs, into the hallway, and disappeared behind the maid's door. Madam stood frozen in the middle of the living room. For the first time, she felt it. Not anger, not hatred, fear, and a question echoed in her head, over and over again. What did he leave behind that he couldn't tell me while he was alive? Madam couldn't rest, not even with hot tea, not even with 2 sleeping pills. She sat on the edge of the sofa all afternoon, staring at the file Ada had brought home. It was back in her hands now after Ada left it carelessly on the kitchen stool. It wasn't full of bank documents, no property papers, nothing dramatic, just a single letter, written in Chief's handwriting, folded once, dated 2 years ago, no greeting, just lines, heavy lines. And one sentence stood out like fire on white cloth. What I owe the world, I have placed in her hands. Madam read that line 23 times. Each time it felt heavier. Who was her? Why would Chief write that? Why now? And why Ada? She leaned back, trying to find air, and then something happened. A memory came. Flashback. 10 years ago. The house was newer then, shinier, busier. Chief had just brought Ada in. A quiet girl, small, thin, dirty feet, big, frightened eyes. Now, he said she was the child of an old friend who had died, said she needed shelter, food and help. Madam hadn't liked the idea, but she played along at first, until one day she caught Chief standing by the hallway mirror, staring at Ada as she dusted the shelves. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't frowning either. He was just watching her, too long, too silently. Madam remembered the unease that crawled up her spine that day. Why are you always looking at that girl? Girl? She had asked. Chief had blinked and quickly turned away. Just making sure she's doing her work properly, he answered, but something in his voice sounded too soft. That was the first time Madam began to see Ada as more than just a maid. But even then, she brushed it off. After all, what could a house help mean to a man like Chief? Back to present. Madam dropped the letter on the table and stood quickly. Her chest was rising and falling. She walked to the mirror in the hallway, the same one from 10 years ago. She stared into it, not at herself, but at the staircase behind her, just like Chief once did, as if Ada might appear there again, as if her shadow still lingered. What have you done, Tony? She whispered. What were you hiding? And for the first time in her life, Madam felt small in her own mansion. Meanwhile, Ada sat on the floor of her servant's room, back against the wall, file beside her, candle flickering in the corner. She held a worn photograph in her hand, a faded picture of a woman and a man beside her, smiling. The same man who had just been buried. She stared at the photo for a long time, then folded it, kissed it softly and slipped it back inside the envelope. Tears didn't fall, but her throat ached from holding them back. She hadn't come here to steal anything. She hadn't planned revenge. She never knew herself, but now Now everything had changed, because the world was finally turning to look at her, and soon they would all know. The compound wasn't what it used to be. It was quieter now, but never silent, because even when no one spoke, the walls whispered. And lately, they whispered Ada's name. First, it was the security man, Kunle, who had seen Madame pacing by the hallway mirror again, same spot, same time every evening. Then it was Clara, the cook, who noticed Madame didn't eat lunch for 2 days straight and had become strangely polite to Ada. Ada, a girl they barely noticed, a shadow in uniform, a background noise. Now, she was walking air. Everyone stared when she passed. They didn't mean to. But they couldn't help it. There was something different. Not in her clothes, not in her steps, in the way the house reacted to her, as if it had finally recognized her presence, as if it knew something was about to shift. Meanwhile, inside Madame's rooms, she had called in her brother, Uncle Desmond, a retired detective with too much pride and too much time. He showed up in jeans and boots, chewing gum as if he were on a casual Sunday stroll. But his eyes were sharp, and when Madame handed him the letter, he didn't say anything for 5 whole minutes. He read, reread, turned the paper over, smelled it, held it up to the light, then said, "You say this came from the maid?" "Yes," Madame said, her voice low. "She brought it back after the funeral. And you're sure she didn't steal it?" "I don't know what to believe." Desmond dropped the paper on the side table and crossed his legs. "You want me to dig into her past?" "Everything," Madame said quickly. "Where she came from, who she is, what she knows, and why Tony gave her this." Desmond gave a slow nod, then smiled. "You think she's his child?" "No," Madame said too fast. "She can't be." But she didn't believe herself, and Desmond saw it. "I'll start tonight," he said, picking up his car keys. "Let's see who the house help really is." Later that night, Ada stood behind the curtains in the kitchen, watching Desmond's car reverse out of the compound. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She just watched, silently. Her heart didn't race. She was prepared for this. Let them dig. Let them search. Let them pull up every file, photo, fingerprint. They wouldn't find what they were looking for, because the truth wasn't in dusty archives. It was inside this house, in rooms locked for years, in boxes Chief had told no one about, in voices Madame refused to remember, in shadows that moved when no one was watching. Meanwhile, in the boys' quarters, Kunle the gateman was talking to Clara the cook. Low voices, nervous laughter. "That girl no be ordinary person, Clara." "Which girl?" "I dunno. Wetin you dey think?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "You dey fear small girl?" "Fear?" "No be fear, no respect, something day. I swear, even Ogatoni dey fear her spirit. That girl hold power. How Chief go write letter give her. He no even dash her anything. He only left her a letter." They laughed, but they didn't stop watching their backs. A few days later, the hall inside Chief Onosi's mansion was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Every portrait on the wall seemed to be watching, judging. The lawyer, Mr. George, stood at the centre of the room, nervous. Perspiration crept along his collar despite the air conditioning. He glanced at the uniformed officer silently by the entrance before adjusting his tie. He hadn't slept for days. Ever since Chief Onosi's death, Mr. George had been receiving calls, not condolence calls. Threats, heavy breathing, masked voices, midnight knocks. One message had simply read, "Alter the will in my favour, or lose more than your career." He knew who it was from. He didn't need to guess, and he knew why. So finally, he did what Chief Onosi told him to do on his deathbed. He called a meeting, not just with the family. He invited the police. He also called in journalists and a few carefully selected elders from the community who were close to the chief. Now here he was, in the mansion of a man whose secrets could set the world ablaze. Veronica, now the widow, sat stiffly in her seat, surrounded by her children, or rather the children everyone believed were the heirs. Her expensive black gown shimmered slightly in the light, but her face was all ice and thunder. Ada sat at the back near the door. It was the lawyer that demanded she should be in that meeting. There was a hush when Mr. George finally cleared his throat and opened a leather file. "Before I proceed," he began, voice barely above a whisper, "I want it known that I feared for my life, but I fear the truth more when it is buried." Murmurs. Veronica's jaw tightened. He opened a sealed envelope, the one Chief had kept hidden for years, the one no one dared to touch even after the man passed. Inside it was a letter, a voice from the grave. "I was instructed," the lawyer said, holding the letter like it burned, "to read this to all of you aloud with everyone present." A beat of silence. "Before that, I have a story to tell, one that only a very few people in this room may know, and even fewer will want it told." Veronica shifted in her chair, trying not to look worried. The lawyer noticed the flicker of fear in her eyes. He took a deep breath and began. "Many years ago," he said slowly, "before Veronica became Chief Onosi's wife, there was another woman in his life, a woman who was meant to be his first and only bride." Gasps. The room rippled. Veronica's hand tightened on the chair rest. The woman's name was Amaka, a university student at the time. Gentle, quiet, pure. She carried Chief's child. He had every intention of marrying her. They even had a secret court wedding witnessed by just one soul, her best friend, Veronica. Heads turned, but things did not go as planned. The lawyer's voice dropped. Chief was called abroad urgently. He left Amaka in the care of Veronica, promising to return, but while he was away, he paused, his voice catching. Something terrible happened. Something that never should have been hidden. The tension was electric now. Some people were on the edge of their seats. Others glanced between Veronica and the lawyer, whispering. The police officers stood straighter. Veronica's fingers now gripped the chair like a claw. "I'll keep the story brief," the lawyer said. "You will hear the rest from the Chief's own words in this letter." Then he looked at Veronica squarely. "But before I read it, I must announce one thing, a decision, a revelation." He turned to the stunned audience. The sealed envelope was meant to be opened today. It contains the final will of Chief Onosi, and according to that will, all remaining properties, including lands, estates and trusts, businesses, fixed deposits, his complete wealth, will go to only one person. Another pause, a collective breath. Veronica sat forward. Her 3 children did the same. One of them even whispered, "It's definitely me." But the lawyer shook his head slowly. "The person is Ada Onosi." A gasp tore through the room. A scream followed. Veronica shot to her feet. "That girl is not my husband's child," she yelled. "She's a stray! A charity case he brought into our home! This is an insult!" The room broke into chaos. Some people murmured in agreement. Others looked confused. One of the elders stood up, demanding order. But the lawyer raised a hand. "I thought you'd say that, madam," he said with a cold smile. "That's why everyone must listen to this story before I read Chief Onosi's letter." Years ago, Veronica was just a young final-year student, bright, ambitious, and dangerously envious. She shared a room with her classmate Amaka, a soft-spoken and beautiful girl who unknowingly held a secret that would change the course of all their lives. Amaka was engaged to Anthony, a powerful and respected business magnate, already in his late 50s. Despite his age, he is still single and he visited the university often just to see her. To others, he was a mentor or sponsor, but to Amaka, he was everything. One evening, Veronica pretended to be asleep when she overheard the most shocking news. Anthony had come to see Amaka in secret. His voice was low, urgent. "Let's do a quiet court wedding," he said. "No one needs to know yet. I'm travelling abroad soon on official duty and I can't let this child be born outside wedlock." Amaka hesitated, then nodded tearfully. "Yes, I'll marry you." And they did, quietly, secretly. No one knew, except Veronica. But Anthony never returned quickly. His trip stretched longer than planned. Months turned into a year. By then, Amaka was heavily pregnant and alone. The night labor came. She groaned in pain, calling out for help. But Veronica, the only one around, ignored her cries. Instead, she did the unthinkable. She left Amaka to struggle through childbirth alone. And when the baby, a baby girl, was born, Veronica wrapped her in a cloth, snuck out, and dumped the crying newborn in the bushes behind the hostel. By morning, Amaka had lost too much blood. She died, clutching air, whispering the name Anthony. When Anthony returned 2 years later, eager to reunite with his bride and meet his child, he was told a devastating tale. Sir, Amaka died during childbirth, and sadly, the baby didn't survive either. Anthony wept. Shattered and grieving, he leaned on the only person who had been close to Amaka, Veronica. She became his comfort, his solace, and in time his wife. But fate has a bitter way of revealing truth. 2 years into their marriage, an old woman from a nearby village showed up at Anthony's estate with a worn bag and a child at her side, a little girl named Ada. She told a story that froze Anthony's blood. I found her 5 years ago, wrapped in bloodied cloth, crying by the bushes behind a school. I took her in. She's mine now, but I know she isn't really mine. From the story that I gathered, she might belong to you. Something stirred in Anthony's chest. A flicker of possibility. He conducted a DNA test behind Veronica's back. The results broke him. Ada was his daughter, Amaka's daughter, the very child he'd mourned for, the child he believed had died. And suddenly, the woman he had married, his saviour, became his deepest betrayal. But Anthony didn't confront her. No, instead he made up a lie. He brought Ada into the house, looked into Veronica's eyes and said, "She's an orphan. Her parents died. We need to help her live." And that was how little Ada, at just 5 years old, was brought into the house as a stranger to her own father and a threat to the woman who tried to erase her from existence. After the murmurs, he held up a letter and began to unfold it. He adjusted his glasses with trembling hands. The sealed envelope, thick and yellowed with age, was already damp with sweat from his grip. He cleared his throat and glanced at the crowd. Ada sat at a corner, her hands clenched tightly on her lap. Veronica stood defiant, breathing heavily. Her children, visibly confused, stared at their mother. He slowly broke the wax seal and pulled out the handwritten letter, Chief Anosi's unmistakable penmanship. Then he began to read. "To my beloved family, if this letter is being read, then I am no longer among the living. But before I left, I knew my house was a pile of secrets built on a dangerous lie. I married Veronica because I thought she was the only thing left to hold on to after losing Amaka and my child. I trusted her. I built an empire beside her, but I never knew I was sleeping beside my greatest betrayal. The truth was revealed to me not through words, but through silence. The kind of silence a man only hears when the spirit of the dead whispers behind his ears at night. I want to address my sons first, Elvis and Chuka. You were raised in my home, trained in my schools, and loved like my own. I gave you my name and shaped you as heirs. But I knew from the start, you are not my blood. You were born before I married your mother. I raised you as mine because I believed a good man does not father only those born of his loins, but those born into his life. I do not hate you, but I will not lie to my grave pretending you are my seed. And now to the one this letter truly belongs to, Ada Anosi. I knew you were my daughter the moment I saw your eyes. You look like your mother, Amaka, the only woman I ever truly loved. I kept you close, but hidden, because I knew the truth would burn this house to the ground. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was waiting for the right moment to give you what is yours. So today I name you, Ada, as the rightful heir to my legacy. All remaining properties, assets, lands, and the controlling shares in my companies belong to you. Let no one contest this. My fingerprints, DNA, and voice recordings are all attached to this will. And if any hand tries to rise against you, let the law strike them first. I do not ask for revenge, Ada. I ask for healing, the kind that only truth can bring, from beyond Chief Anthony Anosi. The hall fell silent. Not a sound, not even the creak of a chair. Then a loud crash. Veronica had flung the flower vase to the floor. She rushed toward the lawyer, screaming, "Lies! Lies! My husband would never! This is forged! This is your doing, George!" But 4 police officers immediately stepped in front of her. One of them raised a document. "Madam Veronica," he said, "this voice recording confirms everything." He played it. Chief Onozi's voice echoed through the speakers. "If I die before Ada receives this, you must protect her, George. She is my only child, my only true heir. Do not fail her, like I did." Veronica fell to her knees, but not from guilt, from rage. She looked up at Ada with burning hatred. "You little snake! I should have ended you when I had the chance." Suddenly, Barrister George stepped forward, his voice cold and firm. "Madam Veronica, you are under arrest for attempted child abandonment, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and forgery. The evidence is overwhelming. Your husband kept everything, even your private letters and deleted texts. It's over." Veronica didn't scream this time. She just stared at Ada like she had seen a ghost crawl out of a grave she buried with her own hands. Her perfectly powdered face melted under the pressure, sweat, tears, and years of pride sliding down her cheeks. Her knees buckled again, but this time no one rushed to help her. How did it all slip from my fingers?" she whispered, almost to herself. She looked around, at Chuka, at Elvis, but they wouldn't even meet her gaze. The same sons she built her life around, the same boys she used as shields, even they were ashamed. "I did it all for you," she whispered to them. "For this family." But Chuka only turned away. Elvis stepped back. Veronica let out a dry, bitter laugh. "I built this house. I wore his ring. I gave my youth, and now you give it to her?" She spat the last word like poison, pointing at Ada. But Ada didn't flinch. She stood calm, tall, graceful, and quiet, like a storm that had passed. Veronica lunged toward her, but the officers held her back. "She's nothing! A mistake I should have erased completely!" Ada finally stepped forward. She looked into the eyes of the woman who once tossed her in a basket like trash. "I forgive you," Ada said softly. Veronica blinked. The room fell even quieter. "I forgive you," Ada repeated, "because I won't carry your bitterness. I have too much to build, too many children like me to lift up. You tried to bury me, but you planted a seed instead." Veronica froze. Those words hit her harder than any slap. She began sobbing, not the loud, dramatic kind, but deep, guttural sobs that shook her whole body. Years of lies, masks, and deceit crumbled into dust at her feet. She was led away in handcuffs. No more pearls, no more power, no more throne. 1 week later, Chief Onozi Foundation headquarters. The compound once ruled by Veronica now had a new nameplate. Ada Onozi, Executive Director. A new dawn had arrived. Ada walked through the halls, now redecorated with portraits of children, outreach projects, and community schools. She paused at a photo of Chief Onozi and her mother, Amaka, in their youth. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she smiled. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. At that moment, a group of young girls rushed up to her, one holding a bouquet. "Miss Ada! Miss Ada! You're a role model! We love you!" She knelt down, took the flowers, and said, "If I can do it, so can you. Never let anyone write your story. You hold the pen." They clapped. The cameras flashed. Justice had been served. The forgotten daughter had become the face of legacy, and the house that once tried to silence her now echoed with her name. Ada Onozi. Hello, besties. Did that touch your heart? Drop your thoughts in your language below. Let me know. What would you say to Ada if you met her? Did Veronica deserve that ending? Your comments keep me going, bestie. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Until next time, bye.